The best way to manage resistance is to manage it from the beginning of the project. I'm going to say that again. The best way to manage resistance is to manage it from the beginning of the project. Anticipating resistance, anticipating, the old Carly Simon song, Anticipation. Anticipating ahead of time where things are going to go wrong is probably one of the most remarkable arts of great managers. If you can assess that, if you can determine where resistance is going to come up and you start to mitigate that early, it's far easier than when the house is on fire. Resistance goes up as the challenges of the project go on. So starting at the beginning of it. So what are some specific things? Let's go through that. The worst thing that a leader can do to manage resistance is to do this. It's your job. I mean, and all of a sudden you move into that mindset and we sort of get into this immature reaction like, I'm not going to do that. So that's like one of the worst ways to resolve resistance. Finding a perspective of people in the trenches. Remember that you're upsetting their apple cart. Now that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to change anything, but just having a mild sensitivity to the fact that maybe there's a single mother out there who's got a kid with asthma who goes to an appointment every Thursday, and now that you've changed her schedule around, she'll have to do that. Just a little sensitivity of that. You're not going to change that for her. That's your job as an employer, but just saying, I'm sorry that happened for you. Hopefully things will work out. But just acknowledging that. That's bigger than just saying, it's your job. Because this will actually build resistance. Managers many times actually build resistance as opposed to correct resistance because they're doing things like this. Understand too that people are afraid of personal loss during change. And it may be something as simple as this. Rita and I used to sit next together in the office. We were good buddies. She helped me out with some things. She's got finance background, I don't. I've got some background on leadership. And all of a sudden, I moved from there to someplace else. That's a personal loss for me. Again, it doesn't mean that we have to go out and have people go through counseling for all that. But what it can mean is that, yeah, it's a tough thing that we go through. I think sometimes just asking leaders, going back again to that question that I asked in the beginning, have you ever moved from place to place? That uncertainty, that discomfort, you can get into the core of their emotions and have them say, oh yeah, that's what that's like. Because that's what all their people are going through when we go through big change. There's loss. There's another big thing that happens during change, and this is where resistance can come up, Seal, is fear of discovery. What do I mean by that? When you make a big change, why would I say there's a fear of discovery? And I've actually been in situations like that where I've talked to people out in the field, met with them one-on-one, had a chance to interview them, and I said, how can I help you? And one man's response to me was, you can leave us alone. Now later on, some things were discovered about him. But the point is that big changes all of a sudden start to unearth things that people didn't know about. And you've had that experience as well. If you see that happening, that's a whole different kind of circumstance that you have to deal with. But when you see resistance building and building and building, there's a couple of things going on. Either people are afraid of loss or they're afraid of discovery. In those circumstances, maybe you tell them, we'll get you more training, we'll help you become competent in the new role. Kind of assuaging that fear, because remember, I've always say, if you reduce anxiety, you'll help people adapt to change. Let me say that one more time. If you reduce anxiety, you'll help people adapt to change. It's a big thing. Organizational losses. I remember one circumstance where the change went south because people literally moved across the street, and people would say, we used to be in that building, and that road is the barrier to us. We don't get along anymore at all. There are things that get lost in the midst of that. And then the notion of expending effort and time and energy. That's knowing those things up front. So again, I go back to understanding those things, managing those things up front. What losses will people entail, and how can we adjust for that? I know of one leader that when a parking lot was moved from one place to another because of an organizational change, his employees had to change over. Guess where he was the first day? He was in the parking lot with them, walking in. I'll tell you, that kind of stuff, those symbolic actions are powerful. They go a long way. But assessing those things up front, Seal, is the big deal. And that goes back to those 10 questions. Where do you see the risks and so forth?